Hey, everyone out there in YouTube land, Dan here from Geekcast Radio, once again doing a Marvel Fresh Start review as I go through all the new Marvel relaunches, discussing how good the books are, and also, most importantly, is it in fact an actual fresh start? This time around, I'm going to be discussing the Immortal Hulk #1, written by Ewing and art by Joe Bennett, and giving you my thoughts and opinions on it, and ultimately if you should pick this up, and especially if you're kind of going back to Marvel or reading it for the first time. I will avoid most spoilers, so if you haven't read this, don't worry. I'll talk about some details, so if you want to know absolutely nothing, the long and short of it is that I did enjoy it quite a bit, and I think it's definitely a good book for anyone that hasn't been reading Marvel, anyone that is looking for a new book to get into. This actually is probably the most fresh of all the Marvel Fresh titles so far. Ultimately, though, what this is doing, what Al Ewing is approaching, the way he's approaching the Hulk is much different than kind of what we've seen in him sometimes, especially, looking at the more cinematic version of him. He is not that lovable, giant Hulk smash type of character. Here, he is the monster. He is that the Jekyll to Bruce Banner's Hyde, and there's a lot more fear. There's actually very little Hulk smashing in this. So if you're a person that wants to see a lot of action with their Hulk book, this may not necessarily be for you, because it is much more of a horror take in a way. But the premise of this is that Hulk doesn't die. And in this case, Bruce Banner is actually gunned down when a robbery at a gas station goes wrong, and other people are also killed. And what we see is that even though Bruce Banner may have been shot in the head, there's no killing him. And Hulk will rise again. And he does. And he then enacts justice, almost like a Ghost Rider-esque in a way. What I felt really intriguing about this, and I'm actually I'll point to the very opening, is this quote. Man is man, on the whole, less good than he imagines himself to be or wants to be. And I think that is very much the premise of what at least this first issue is focusing on, is that reflection of ourself, basically. You see this running throughout this book, the idea of people thinking they're a good person, even if necessarily their actions don't necessarily reflect that. In this case, where we're finding out that, what starts as this bank robber that seems rather, callous in his actions, learning more about him, learning more why he did what he did, and seeing that there are layers to him, in the sense of why he did what he did may not be for there are reasons, that there's justification, at least in his mind. And it's interesting seeing how he compartmentalizes basically what he did and who he is, and how he separates them, and how he thought his actions in a way were justified or necessary. And he's not necessarily, he regrets them, but at the same time, he was in a place where he felt that that's what he had to do. And there's this, you see this question pop up again and again, saying, am I a good person? And what I find interesting about that is how it relates to Hulk in a way, or Bruce Banner. There's often different approaches when it comes to how people look at Bruce Banner and Hulk. Writers have sometimes look at them as two separate entities, that there are two opposing figures trying to take up the same space. And with that, conflict ensues. And in this case, it seems like the way Al Ewing is approaching it is that they are, one of the same, but more of a distortion of one another, where Bruce Banner isn't as separate from the actions of the Hulk as he believes himself to be, right? Or at least that's what he's going to be exploring. The idea of, is Hulk actually the separate entity? Is he this other figure? Or are the actions of Hulk the subconscious actions that Bruce Banner wishes to take? Or is that where his motivations come from? Or, or the reasoning behind Hulk's the way he is it coming from the Hulk, or is it just Bruce Banner kind of extending his feelings out into this other entity? And this Hulk is a lot different than our typical Hulks, like I mentioned. And even when we first see him, I'm going to pull up a specific page. He is a lot more primal in the sense of even the way he stands. And when we first see him, I'm trying to find the page. He doesn't necessarily, he's not that standing upright figure. He's not like a normal type of Avenger that we come to love. He, like, even the way he's looking here, he just looks a little bit, again, like I mentioned, primal in his emotions, primal in the way his posturing. Although he's cognitive of the decisions he's making. This isn't a dumb Hulk. He has full conversations. He, is kind of contemplating and discussing with this person he's hunting down. And again, that's where it comes to where the connection to Bruce Banner is. A lot of the words that he's saying, he's looking to basically enact justice or make this person pay in a way for the things that he did wrongfully. And he holds this kind of guardian-esque type of quality to himself, going after this person, and you see him enacting and doing some truly brutal things, although most of it happens off camera. This is a much more violent, not in the sense of blood and gore, but there are deaths in this, and you don't necessarily always see that in a Marvel book, especially when it involves people that are of a younger age. So there are stakes here that I wasn't really expecting to see in this realm. I think it's handled with a tactfulness, though. It doesn't feel exploitive. My only question, though, so when it's looking at that, basically looking at the idea of Bruce Banner and Hulk and this other character, the idea of reflection of self, if we are truly who we are, the good person that we think we are, or how there's often a distortion there, does it lose a little bit when the characters that it's focusing on, there seems to be a lack of control in the sense of this character that that is a central figure that Hulk is hunting down. He did what he did because of a situation that was, by all estimation, that we know, out of his hands, out of his control, similar to Bruce Banner, where the Hulk's actions to this realm, we think that those are Hulk's actions. Bruce Banner can't control Hulk in this case, at least. So if your idea that you're going for, opening your quote with about how we're not the reflection that we are, we're not the person that we think we are in some instances, we're not as good as we think we can be, does that lose a little bit when what you're looking at, the reasoning behind these people's actions actually have a tidbit of justification, or is that justification not as legitimate as they think it is? In the sense of, as I mentioned, is Bruce Banner much more control of these actions than when we're led to believe? That the final panels, in a way, make me believe that. And this other, robber that is the main character, is he in fact, is he just using that as an excuse for his own misdeeds? There's not a lot of huge backstory here. It's kind of just looking at the brief glimpses that we do get. But ultimately, I just find a lot of the questions this is raising, the execution of it, rather intriguing. I thought the art from Joe Bennett was effective in this. Like, that the Hulk figure, like I mentioned, the way he designs them, and the force of nature that he isn't here, he does feel like a frightening force. So I think, I'm really excited for where this could go. The question of, is this a fresh start? Can anyone pick this up that has not been reading Hulk or a Marvel book? This is in one sense, is one of the biggest fresh starts, because it's a different take on Hulk than it currently has been under Greg Pak and other writers. It's even in the genre, really. There are some ties to some things that happened in Marvel previously. This idea of Hulk dying and coming back to life. Well, he originally died in Civil War II, so there are some elements that are still lingering from that. If you don't know that, well, now you do, but it's not all that important. There are ultimately, the most important thing is that much of the public thinks Hulk is dead. And there are hints, and there's little, things in the background saying people spotting the Hulk thinking he's actually alive. And that's kind of the question in the public eye right now is a Hulk actually alive? Is he the one kind of doing a lot of these things they're hearing about? So don't know how that will develop. There's their main detective that's also looking into this case. So if that will play a bigger role moving forward. But I just thought I have not read a lot of Hulk recently. I think the last time I was consistently staying with the Hulk was with the Planet Hulk run. I picked it up here and there, but I just felt like this was a great way to revitalize the character of the Hulk. I don't know if this is something that could go on for 50 issues or something like that, but if it's done well, and I think it could, if they find new ways to explore this idea. But ultimately, looking at all the Marvel refresh titles or fresh start titles or whatever they're calling it, I think this is probably up there amongst my favorites so far. So if you're if you're looking for a good book to jump into, this will definitely be a high recommend on the list. So I would be curious, though, if you read this, what your thoughts and opinions on it, what you've been thinking about this Marvel fresh start from start to beginning. We began with the Avengers and all that. I'll be having some more reviews on some of the other books that came out this week, including Deadpool and Doctor Strange. So I'm looking forward to diving deeper into those. But if you like what you're viewing, hearing, do all that stuff that they do for YouTube, the liking, the sharing, the subscribing, the bell knocking. I don't even know. You've done YouTube before. You know how it works. But for now, remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching.